Hello and welcome to this video. Today I wanted to try stamping my own Christmas cards. I picked up a lot of stamps. Some of them I already tried out with like one color because I was actually curious on how they would look like, but I never really tried stamping in a proper way. So I'm gonna test different stamping pillows out and different color ends. I actually picked up some office stampings and those like folia colored stamps, and I'm also going to try alcohol inks and acrylics and water-based markers. We shall see which one works best. For testing purposes I'm using a heart, and as you can see I have an acrylic block, and usually these kinds of stamps they stick onto the acrylic block and just really easily and really sturdily. So for starters I'm going to use the office line, and you may notice that at some point I apparently totally forgot that I was filming, and I went super out of frame with the other stamps. So I'm just gonna basically explain the results. But as you can see when I stamp this, it kind of looks like it has a grit texture, and that is because it actually has. I noticed that many stamps like this seem to have this like kind of grit texture. Not all of them, but many seem to have it. And it's nice that it actually shows up. Also, I should mention that I'm actually using watercolor paper, but I'm using the like smooth side, not the rough side here. And that's just because when I want to make Christmas cards, I want some sturdier like paper and nothing as flimsy as like printer paper, and this one worked out pretty well. I actually tried out 5 different methods for the folia ones, because they are quite juicy. As one can see, they got quite like spotty, and all of the results look very different. But I'm gonna test that a bit more later. As for alcohol inks, water-based markers and acrylics, although the acrylics left behind where it stamped some really nice colors, it didn't really work. It just is way too liquid and it doesn't adhere to the silicone wall. Now the folia ones are the ones where I have the most colors, so I want to make them work, but if I can use red and blue for the like hearts with the like online stamp, office stamp things, I will try to use them because they seem to work really well. I also wanted to try out how much detail each color pick up, and besides it actually feathering out a bit because the blue stamp pad was a bit too moist at the time. The red one worked wonders, and then the other stamps actually worked really well, and the purple was actually the alcohol marker. Surprisingly, that kind of works. So it seems like on the like thinner edges the colors can actually stick. It wasn't as detailed as the stamp pads, but it kind of worked, and it has a nice effect of like, I don't know, like the like failed typewriter kind of thing, or smudgy ink kind of thing. But since most colors are the folia ones, I wanted to try different methods. So I'm trying swiping, I'm trying just hitting it once with the thing. Now with the swiping method, you can kind of tell that one of the corners where I'm swiping seems to always have like a bit of a darker thing. And I also wanted to try to swipe and then dab it onto like a sponge pad, which also worked well. So the best method I found is to just carefully dab it on, since they're quite juicy and they have soft sponges. It means that if you just carefully dab it on and not press it on, it should hopefully have the perfect amount of color. Now the last test I need to do is how like fast these are, how water fast and alcohol fast, because I want to use the stamps first and then color them in, not the other way around, because I figure that might be a bit difficult. So I'm using this beautiful hummingbird stamp that I picked up very recently at the Christmas market. And I want to try 2 different stamp pads. I am going to use my black folia one, and I also have a metallic one, which I'm very curious how that one works. It's like a glittery metallic, and in the end of this, like, it does smudge a bit. Even after it's dried, the pigments don't adhere 100%. But it looks quite cool. So my first test is alcohol-based markers, and they seem to smudge it a little bit, and I have the feeling they do lighten the color, but not too bad. Water-based markers definitely worked really well. I purposefully went over the lines, even on the bottom tail feathers, just so I could see how it smudged. It still smudged a slight bit, but these ones dried pretty quick and it worked out well. Now, lastly, I wanted to try out my preferred method, watercolors. In this test, they actually worked really well. They hardly smudged anything, even though I used a lot of water. And then, of course, trying out the one that was stamped with the metallics. For this one, I just went with a simple gradient and I sped it up. I didn't really try to stay in the lines, I just tried to see what happens if you cover the lines. And it seems like the glittery stamp pads I have, they kind of are a bit resistant to water. It doesn't really want to stick there. You can still, like, cover the colors a little bit and dull them. It seems like it's removing the glitter definitely a little bit, but seems the medium might be like some kind of like glue or something, because the colors were definitely not sticking to the surface and it felt a little differently. As you can see, after they dried, the glitter one didn't get smudged. I just had like bits of glitter everywhere on my hand and on the paper, but those could be wiped away. And the best one for work was actually surprisingly the watercolors, which I guess is because the brush I'm using is soft and it doesn't really rub onto it. So let's actually get into Christmas card stamping. I wanted to start out with the reindeer, and because I don't really have a brown, I only have pastel tones and very vibrant colors, I'm actually using this like copper color metallic one. And for this one, since there's a lot of nooks and crannies that I couldn't reach with these kinds of pads if I tried, I'm going to try layering this stamp. So I'm actually going in with a Q-tip that is slightly damp, and I'm trying to clean off all the areas. It didn't really work, it seemed. I still had some like slight indents from the others, but I hope when I put the other colors down, it will not be too noticeable. And then I switched over to the red stamp, marked all of the hearts and all of the items like the mushroom caps and all that stuff. And again, just went over the areas that I don't want to have color on with a Q-tip. I had to fix up some areas because I wiped away a little bit of the edges of that. And this time I actually went over it twice to make sure that there will be no residue, and I tried to line it up, which you can kind of see on the heart I missed a little bit, but it's always really hard to line up stamps, especially if you don't have like something on the edge where you can just line it up on. But it's okay. There is a method for lining these up perfectly always, which is to make like a square either with magnets or something else where you can just slide in the stamp. And there's actually like stamp pad things where you can just like close it like a book, and that will help you line it up, but I own neither of those, and per hand worked pretty decently. Next up was this Santa Claus, and for this one I just used 2 colors, black and red, and the rest I'm going to add with watercolors. Then I went a bit basic and I wanted to use some metallics on these angel wings and the star. And lastly, I wanted to make a Christmas tree. Now for this one, the items on the sides are actually so out of reach for the other colors that I can just do a multicolored stamp in one try. Although it will probably need a bit of fixing up if I'm not careful. But I decided to go with the fitting colors. Like most of the items were fittingly red, like the hearts, the candy canes, and the apples. And I decided to actually detail the apple leaves a little bit and wipe it away and try to put a little bit of green on there. If you do this, it might get some color on your stamp pad, so you might have to like carefully dab that on a piece of paper. I luckily didn't have that issue, but it's definitely a possibility, and especially if you use a lighter color and have a darker color there, it might smudge a little bit. But mine worked out really, really well, and the Christmas tree turned out super nicely. I let this one dry a little bit longer than the other time when I tried the like water resistance for these, and even after a day of drying, it actually smudged them. It's the same black that I tested the smudge test with, and I actually this time didn't really purposefully go over the lines except for like a slight bit when I added the base color for the face, but it wasn't really like rubbing or touching or more water than the previous try. It was actually way less, and it still smudged a slight bit, but luckily I managed to blend that out where it was still wet. So for this one I'm going for some simple shading with some light brown with the beard and skin tones, and then some shading for the white part with some really thinned out red and just strengthening the red of the little Christmas hat and giving it some like shading and folds. Just some really, really simple designs, but it definitely makes it look really neat. As for the reindeer, I wanted to actually color in the rest of the colors that I didn't have, and the colored areas that actually only had outlines, which included the acorns, the mushrooms, and I actually went over the reindeer a little bit because the metallic wasn't as potently like shiny as I hoped. So I just used a little bit of a brown tone to go over that again. I basically at that point went over most of the colors, including the red of the hearts and the green for the bows, where it fastens the ornament to the reindeer. Just so they would pop out a bit more, because in the end, I couldn't really get these stamps to cover 100%, but at least they didn't smudge and they didn't leave weird spots except for some parts of the red. But I noticed it seems to be an issue with like certain colors. Especially like the like more vibrant colors. I think they just have so much pigment in them. The yellow was a little bit spotty, the red was a bit spotty. The green was actually fine, but that was a very light green. So I think the pastels in this case actually work a bit better, and the other colors are just way too pigmented. It might solve after a while, once I use them a little bit and they're not as juicy anymore, but for now I just work around them in recoloring everything with my watercolors, which I think makes it pop a little more. And I like the variety with the like slight spotting it actually has. I think stamping first and then going in with watercolors definitely looks super, super nice. For the reindeer, I decided I didn't really want text on it, so I'm going to actually make a little watercolor border. And I chose just like 2 tones of green that would like a bit woody, but maybe also a bit Christmassy. And I just went around trying to avoid the design, but blend it out towards the middle so it looks a bit more natural. And then for the wings, I wanted to have a very, very simple background design that screams Christmas, so I actually wetted my paper a lot and put on some green and red stripes that are very, very muted. And then I also colored in the wings themselves, which in the end I did kind of regret a little bit because it definitely took away the sheen. But with that I was actually finished with the coloring. And then I just used my foil pen and wrote a little message on most of them. And here's the results. Also, I'm gonna put out a video reviewing that foil pen very soon. I just didn't think it would fit into the Christmas spirit to review this pen. Instead, I just wanted to use it for a project. As you can see, first of all, the foil pen works beautifully. It leaves a very shiny font behind. You just have to be careful because it is a bit tricky to use at first to like get like perfect crisp lines, but it actually writes very smooth if you don't try anything fancy, but just do like a single handwriting. But more on that later. I'm actually quite happy with how these cards turned out. I think they look really beautiful. I love the shading on the Santa Claus. I love the simplicity of the Christmas tree and that you can actually see that it was stamped. And for the reindeer, I love how the layering worked, even if the heart is a little off center. It just gives a character. The only one, as I mentioned, I'm not really happy about is the wings. I want to get over it with a really, really light blue, but the pigment still wanted to stick on the surfaces like very weirdly where the metallic pigment was. So it muted that a bit much, but I still think it's a neat card. It's just not my favorite, and if I could change something, I definitely would. But overall, this was really fun and fun to experiment with. I know there's many different types of stamps and like fancy brands out there that have different kinds. The clear stamps, I know there's some really expensive brands that have like very soft stamps that pick up like way more details. I actually talked to a woman that made some really lovely cards when I was at a Christmas market like 2 weeks ago. Which is also where I picked up the hummingbird stamp. And actually also the one with the like fine detail lettering. And it definitely helped a little bit. She also showed me some of the expensive stamps and how much more details they get. But for these like really cheap stamps, especially the Christmas ones which I got in a set, it actually worked out really, really well. They still pick up a decent amount of detail, and I think they look really nice, and it definitely was a lot of fun to try and use them. I'm sure with a bit of practice they will look a bit cleaner and once my stamp pads aren't as juicy, but for now I'm super happy with the results, and I'm definitely going to give out all the cards, maybe minus the wing one. I haven't decided yet. It depends. I will let it sit. Maybe I will re-stamp the like metallic part of the wings, because else it just is a really lovely card. But that is to be determined, and I still have a couple days to decide until it's Christmas. But anyways, hope you enjoyed watching me dabble in stamping, and I hope it gives you some inspiration for making your own Christmas cards. I hope you have a great day. Bye bye!